Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to do a drawing and a watercolor painting of a bee eater. It's a small, pretty, colorful little bird, and I think it's really fun, and it gives you some practice on how to exercise your color choice. Now, one thing when it comes to doing subjects that have a wide range of colors is I generally think it's a good idea to have this little thing in your mind. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it like this. This is what I do. All right. And it's not necessarily that you're planning, because I think planning kind of gives the impression that you're outlining everything in detail. No, you just want to have kind of like a roadmap or a little guide that will kind of like keep you in the right direction, so you don't have to think too much about the process and you can just have fun. Now, I know that I've seen it's like a big movement where people don't seem to plan anymore. They just go from palette to paint. A lot of those people will not necessarily be honest with you and tell you that, listen, that took years to accomplish or lots of practice. Okay. And even to this day, I am shameless when it comes to doing my sketches, practicing. Some of the greatest artists you can imagine, they did sketches, they did studies, they have tons of practice sketches and studies they did in color, whatever it is. Don't be afraid of using visual aids like this. Don't be afraid of using, scrap paper to practice your colors before you apply it. Don't be afraid to mix your colors and feel them out before you put them on the canvas or you put them on whatever the painting service is that you're using. Don't be afraid of those things. Don't be afraid to practice. Don't be afraid to sketch and make mistakes. Don't be afraid to be loose before you eventually refine your skill, okay? Because those are the things that actually make you better. All right, so basically when it comes to, thinking about color choices, this is what I generally do. I generally create my simple little color wheel. I put the main color groups there. So I have my red, green, yellow, blue, my violet, my orange. Now, like with this bee eater that I'm going to be painting, the main colors I see it's more like a red and a yellow. I see a red, yellow, orange, green, a little bit of blue. Now, after I identify the main colors, what I do is, and I start thinking about the properties or qualities of those colors. So for example, I notice that the red is more on the scarlet side, more on the orangey side, right? And I notice that there's a deep red as well. So there's a red that's closer to, like it's moving towards black, right? There's a little bit of that. So the reason why it's good to think about that is that because then while I'm doing this, and this for me, at this point, I can do this mentally where I'm thinking about my colors and I'm thinking about my palette, thinking about the subject. So these are the three things I'm thinking about. I have my visual aid, I have the subject I'm looking at or thinking about, and I have my color palette, right? So I'm thinking about, okay, I'm looking at the subject, I'm identifying the colors I see, and I'm thinking about the colors I have that will create that. In this case, I see red, I see a deep red, I see a green that's kind of like in the middle, like a phthalo green. And I see like a little bit of a yellow green, and I see a bluish green. So I'm thinking, okay, either I'll have a green I'll add blue to, or I'll have a green I'll have a blue, I'll have green too. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, you can have a greenish blue or a bluish green. I'm going to, since I see a green on this side, to be more harmonious, I'm just going to stick with my greens. And then maybe if I need to, I may add a little bit of blue to it. Now, I won't use an orange. I'm going to use my yellow and my red. So I have two yellows, my Hansel Yellow Deep and my Benzimidazolone yellow. So this is more like a mid yellow. This is more like an orangish yellow, obviously. For this orange, I'm going to either use my yellow, and if it's not orangey enough, I will just add a bit of my Pyrrole red, and that will create the orange that I need. Now, another thing that's important is that people sometimes tend to, if you have a subject that's colorful, people tend to sometimes forget that even though you have color, you have to have form. See, you have to still think about the fact that the bird it has mass, it has volume. So you can't just paint all those colors and ignore values, you see? Otherwise, you're just going to create a colorful pattern. It's going to be flat. See, that could be your style as well. So this may not necessarily be relevant to you, but I think it's good to still think about volume a little bit. So when I'm picturing this in my mind, after I identify the colors, and the next thing I think about is how do I adjust the the colors that I have to create the different properties. So for example, I have a yellow. How am I going to make the yellow darker? If I see like the yellow gets darker at some point, I can darken my yellow in different ways. So I can have my yellow, I can either mix it with a complement, like say, violet. And in this case, I may just use my ultramarine blue, all right, because it's like a violet blue. Or I may mix it with a neutral like sepia, or I may take it down a notch with my yellow ochre or just my burnt sienna. You don't have to. I know traditionally people tell you when you're darkening a color, you mix it with a complement. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can mix it with a color that's just darker or just deeper in value. However, you have to be careful because, if I mix my yellow with a green, for example, then I'm going to be taking my yellow in this direction. You see, I may not necessarily want to go here. So I may mix it. You can mix your yellow with red because red is on the value scale, red is deeper in value than yellow. So you can, to complement your work, since I see, uh, you know, parts of the bird that has red, I may actually mix a little bit of my pyrrole red with my yellow just to deepen it a little bit. So you may actually just mix it with a red, and even though it's an orangish kind of a yellow, it's still a little bit deeper in value. So you can think of deepening your colors in different ways, and this is why it's good to play around with your colors. And like I generally have a piece of scrap paper that I use to test out my colors before I actually start painting, or experiment a little bit before I actually apply it, because sometimes you don't want to experiment while you're painting. I do that a little bit, but I have already tested my colors in a way that makes me more confident with my color mixing choices. So when I'm actually painting the subject is not as risky. I could actually deepen the yellow using burnt sienna, and it's good to practice doing this. And I may actually deepen my yellow using my sepia. See that they each have their own little a subtle variation that makes them unique to a different situation. You think about each of the different shades of yellow and think which one best harmonizes overall with the painting that you have. You can have a form. Here you have light, right? And here you have areas in shadow. So this is in shadow and this is in light. See? So in areas like this, I'm thinking if this is all yellow, down here, I'll use a lot more sepia. In this area, when I'm darkening these shadows, I may not necessarily I have yellows, right? I'm thinking this is how I'm mapping it out. I'm going to use mostly yellow in these areas and just dilute it. All right. So I'm just going to use yellow and water in these areas. And as it turns around, I'm going to use more yellow, and I may use a little bit of, say, burnt sienna. Yeah, so this is what's going to happen as it turns around. So in these areas, I'll use more of this. Now, as it goes all the way around in the shadow, this is where I'll start using my sepia on this side. And of course, you experiment with the amount of sepia you put in to create the depth and shadow that you need. So these are ways that I kind of map out my color choices before I begin. And I feel like it's very useful practice that you do stuff like this. Don't feel like, I know there are lots of videos where you guys just see people just jump into painting and they don't do any preparatory sketches. They don't play around with their colors. This is because in most cases, especially if they're good at it, they have done tons of this already where it's almost like memorized. So they know what will happen if they mix yellow with this. If you're beginning, you don't know what will happen, and it may cost you your entire painting. I usually say, when I teach students, I say short-term inconvenience, long-term convenience. It's better you take a few moments to tie your shoelaces than learn the hard way if you walk and ignore it. Take the time, do a few sketches, think about your color choice, experiment a little bit if you need to, and then you move forward. So before we jump into it, just want to take a moment to thank everyone who have supported my book. It means so much. Thanks, guys. And if you haven't already, please leave a comment or a review wherever you purchase it. If you did on Amazon, please leave a comment there. I appreciate, or whatever, even if it's constructive criticism, that's fine. Just like with art in general, we have to be open and embrace constructive criticism. And I appreciate all the feedback I've gotten, especially those that really say something about what you got, or what you didn't get, or what you expected and what you didn't get. That's fine as well. I appreciate all the feedback. And just like with art, you have to be open and embrace feedback. Feedback is very important for your growth, even if it's not necessarily from people who have no idea about art. Okay, expose your art to people who you trust their opinion and you trust that they mean well for you. All right. So the quality of feedback you get, of course, is important. You have to try to weed out people who are just being jerks. All right. But be open when it comes to your art to criticism, and constructive criticism especially. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to give the video a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do, and I'll see you in the next video.